What's good? Welcome to the where mythos meets method and methods solve mysteries. I'm your host, Christopher, and today I kind of want to talk about something a little delicate. Um, I want to talk about psychosis, and if you've watched me before, either on YouTube or on Substack, you might know that psychosis is very important to me because I've been through two major psychotic breaks in my life, and they're no joke. I take that very seriously, and even though I'm open about my experiences, anyone who talks to me can learn about it for real. But I think it's important to talk about this subject because so many people deal with it these days, especially with just the nature of our world right now. It's maddening, literally maddening, and I don't want that to go unheard. That you're not crazy. And if you do deal with it, I hope you get the help that you need, and that you realize people are there to support you. So yeah, but I kind of wanted to talk about today um, what psychosis has taught me. You know, um, psychosis is one of those things. It's different for everybody, but there's some patterns, I think. But for me, it was such a crazy experience. Both psychotic breaks were such crazy experiences that I just there was there was no way I couldn't learn from the experience. You know what I mean? It was that singular. It was that particular to me and my story. You know what I mean? Like if I ignored what happened, that'd be my own loss. So much wisdom, so much pain can be learned from and transmuted through that process. And I kind of wanted to share what psychosis has taught me in life, in uh, esoteric thought, in philosophy, in mindset. You know, but yeah, that's what today's about. So first, psychosis taught me that the mind is a source, and exploitation of resources, abuse of resources, starts from the mental realm, that mental source. So I kind of think of it as like a precursor to addiction, right? You exploit your imagination to where you want to get a certain experience out of your mind and out of your mental realm. So you're willing to do anything to get to that effect, to get to that state of mind, to get to that being. Um, I think we can live in these deluded realities where the imagination becomes a source for us. And I think imagination is very powerful, but it can be dangerous, especially when not, processed correctly. You know what I'm saying? And I think people with addictive personalities, um, I have an addictive personality. This is what I've learned for myself, but I think it all begins from an abuse of the mental realm as a source, as a source of power, as a source of information, as a source of, all these different things that give us life as it is. And when we exploit it, we're given this like temporary sense of power, sense of control, right? And that leads to a lot of masturbatory uh, actions that give us nothing but validation and dopamine and satisfaction, if not for a long time, but for, uh, a few seconds, a few minutes, a few hours. You know what I'm saying? And I think masturbatory actions are not just in, the erotic space. It's not just in porn. They're in social media bubbles. You can subscribe to a certain number of people on the internet that hold your same views or hold your same thoughts of where you are at in life right now, and they just feed you consistent ideas that validate that cycle, that validate that mindset that you may or may not be succeeding with. You know what I mean? And I think masturbatory actions are also in conversation. When you have conversations where your goal is only to appraise yourself or to comfort yourself, and not construct yourself, not, question things, not, challenge yourself or be challenged by someone else. You know what I mean? I think when we have an addictive personality in the mind, it's not necessarily cut in stone with, weed or alcohol or any other drug. Sometimes it could be as simple as a type of person that you tend to go to for your stress or um, for your want of satisfaction or validation. And while that is valid in its own sense, it doesn't lead to growth. It doesn't lead to that, like I said, construction, right? Masturbation is really just appraisal, and hollow appraisal at that. But yeah, the next one, what psychosis taught me that patterns can be created because you're unstable, and we often just take them and run with it. you know I believe that psychosis is one of the causes of psychosis is an observation of a pattern, and this pattern can be anything, but that pattern becomes venerated, heightened by um, the ego because of any number of circumstances or beliefs that you hold, and those patterns become a self-appraising loop that feeds on isolation, that feeds on solitude, that feeds on loneliness, that feeds on separation. Excuse me. And I think the pattern, when it comes to psychosis, it's usually like a ridiculous thing or something that might be like fringe, not necessarily all agreed upon by all parties. And I think that when our mind creates patterns is usually because they're looking for stability. It's looking for stability. It's looking for um, a grounding for stimuli that exists in your life that you haven't processed yet, right? Um, and when we're psychotic, you don't think you're psychotic because the patterns are so clear to you. You know what I mean? And you think that you're stable enough, but you're just smarter than everyone else, or you're more spiritual than everyone else, or you're more strong than everyone else. But patterns, like I said, can be created because you're unstable. And we often literally take them and run with it to its natural conclusions. And questioning, in my experience with psychosis, right? Every time I had a question for a voice, they often inflicted like mental pain on me or gave me something harder to chew on, where the processing became that much more confusing and more painful for my mind to handle, right? So questions were seen as a threat to my thinking process, to my world at the time. Because when you're psychotic, the world becomes mental. You know what I mean? I'm gonna get to that later, but um, to continue this, assumptions are more comfortable for the ego, which drives, again, isolation, separation, right? Psychosis also taught me to not allow the external world to become secondary stimulus. I've already talked about this a bit, but um, this is not to be construed as a rejection of manifestation principles, the as within so without. If you're calm in the mind, the world will reflect that over time, right? What I mean is to not allow the mind to become your safe haven. Feel safe in your mind. It should not be like, feel safe in your mind, right? But it should not be the sole comfort or your sole source of proof, validation, or feedback, even, right? And this is fragile, right? Because when we have a logic, an internal logic, things make sense in that way. And it's hard to break that. That programming has to do with that conditioning, and this is fragile in that respect. But having friends, family, mentors, teachers to give honest and intentional feedback is important to avoid echo chambers of an insecure ego, right? We need correction. We need the external world to give us feedback. You know what I mean? When we're psychotic, it's a feedback loop of ignoring the immediate external reality for mental activity that serves the ego, right? It's different from, ignoring your immediate reality for a manifestation. You are separating yourself from the result of the manifestation occurring, and you are appreciating what you have in the moment. You are in the present moment and taking in the world as it is, but detaching from what you want. When it's psychotic, I feel like it's when you ignore what's immediately around you. You ignore the external because what's happening in your mind is giving you all the proof you need that you are above your situation, above who you're around, above any help, above an honest conversation, And the ego thrives on this self-produced feedback and creates this narrative that is driving, again, isolation, solitude, separation. And I think that's why psychosis doesn't feel wrong. Like when I was psychotic, it felt like, well, that's not true. There were certain moments when I was psychotic where it felt, fucking awful. But psychosis usually doesn't feel wrong to the psychotic in the sense that you feel like you're living in a world that's changing according to your mind. I don't know if that made sense, but it doesn't feel wrong. It feels like it's just how your life is turning out. That's like fate. You know what I mean? Any clarity found from external sources is rejected as a potential threat when you're psychotic. And I think, psychosis is important to discuss amongst creatives and organizers, really, because it affects those on the periphery, the fringe, the outsiders of convention, And I think if I create, to heal myself, right, I should also serve those who feel they can't access the norm, who can't articulate exactly what's bothering them. On an existential state, wow, on an existential scale, I mean, you know what I mean? There are people who are dealing with problems that are way bigger in their minds than they are if they had a support system, or if they had art that, or if they had things in the world that fed them the nutrients and the feedback and the ideas that construct them, challenge them, yeah. I just think it's so important to talk about this. This is going to be part of a series, I think, because I've learned a lot from psychosis, and I want to continue to try and help any way I can. So if this spoke to you in any way, if you want to talk about anything I talked about today, if you have any questions, feel free to comment down below. Feel free to, DM me. I'm always willing to have a conversation. And if you guys liked my writing, if you guys like this video, right, and you want to read some of my writing or you want to listen to some of my music, go to the link down below. Yeah, that's really all I need to get better at these outros. Introductions are getting better, but you know, I think the outros need some work. But again, thank you guys for watching. I'll be back sooner rather than later. Peace. Maze out.